Welcome to Tales from the Bridge. Thank you so much for joining us today. We have a very special episode, Neill Blomkamp and Peter Watts, the extended cut. We're very excited to bring this one to you. This episode is more than twice as long as the first one, so we touch up on a lot of stuff that no one has ever heard before. We're really excited to bring this one to you. We know that we have a lot of listeners out there that love Neill Blomkamp films, and he's got a new one out called Gran Turismo opening in theaters shortly. And then we know that a lot of our listeners, just like us, are huge Peter Watts fans. You're really going to love this episode. There's a lot of interesting things that we talk about and some interesting stories, let's just say that. So thanks so much for joining us today. If it's your first time, please follow the show, subscribe, download the episodes, go back and check out our catalog. We've got a lot of good stuff out there, a lot of interesting conversations with different people, and then we talk about books and film all the time. So thank you for joining us if this is your first time, and then for everyone else who's been listening to us for a while, thank you so much. We have so much gratitude for you folks. All right, let's not waste any time. Let's make our way over to the bridge.
Neill, tell us about District 10.
Bird. It's a good intro. I like that. Who did Peter get you guys onto Jitsi, or was it the other way around, or does everyone just use Jitsi without me knowing?
No, that's Peter.
It's Peter's fault.
Yeah, I think everybody uses Zoom. I'm on this other Tapestries thing where we get to hang out with people from Tesla and Neuralink and so on and ask them questions and every couple of weeks, I talk about, hey, did you realize that Zoom just had to pay $21 million for sharing its user data with LinkedIn and Facebook? Yeah, we've all sold our soul, but we tech bros who are at the top of our field and know everything in the game just can't think of another alternative to Zoom. Yeah. So they all use Zoom still, even though Jitsi is here.
Cool. Well, I'm happy to be on it.
All right. Well, today we have a very special episode. We have one of our favorite authors back on the show, Peter Watts. I would like to add that Peter is one of my personal favorite authors right now. And I do also want to say that he's one of my favorite people who is an author. And I have a cousin who's an author. So
I hate all my relatives too.
We also have the widely known visionary filmmaker, Neill Blomkamp, with us as well. Neill has made such films as Chappie, Elysium, and District 9. But why do we have the two of them on the show today? We'll definitely get to that. But I do want to start things off a little bit differently. Last time you were on the show, Peter, your phone ringer went off, and there was a Led Zeppelin tune. And I just want to ask you, Led Zeppelin or Pink Floyd? And
Jesus.
I know that's a big one. And Neill, I know you listen to a lot of music too, so if you can weigh in on this debate, and you can just say the Beatles and you win. But
you did say you were going to bring that up again, and you never did. And I thought that I had dodged that bullet.
The Beatles are incredibly, actually, very low on the list for me. Truth be told.
Oh wow!
So I would, and I love Pink Floyd, slightly more than Led Zeppelin personally.
The thing about Led Zeppelin is they shouldn't work.
Yeah.
They seem to break pretty much every rule of making coherent music. And apparently they were all stoned out of their minds when they recorded Physical Graffiti, which is one of their best.
Right.
But somehow it works. And I have no expertise in music. I know that Pink Floyd is more classically based and Led Zeppelin is more blues based.
But Pink Floyd doesn't feel classic. Well, I mean, it has a surreal element to it that I love. It's just it's very trippy.
That's very true. But Led Zeppelin almost defies you not to like it. And there's a lot of Led Zeppelin I do not like. Mm-hmm. Like Whole Lotta Love and Dazed and Confused, I think are boring, overlong.
On a totally separate note, I listened to A Boy Named Sue from Johnny Cash today, and I can't believe how much I love that. I haven't heard it in a few years.
1967 or
crazy.
Something.
Yeah, it's just so good.
Whoa, yeah.
I mean, if I had to storytelling.
If I had to, take only one artist with me to a desert island, it would be Jethro Tull, hands down.
Right.
Oh wow! And what a performer too. I've watched videos of that guy, and he was just wild.
Yeah, I mean, I would not. The past few times I went to his concert, to Tull's concert, I swore I would never do it again because he lost his voice basically in the 90s.
Have you guys seen that? I think it's a Tom Waits interview where he is essentially the Joker from Chris Nolan's Batman. Have you guys seen this?
No,
I have not.
but I feel like Waits lost his voice I almost worry he's going to have to switch to sign language in some way, right? Like he's got that smokers gravel going on. But that's always what I love.
It's more
about
of a feature than a bug, right?
Yeah.
Like, I mean, was he ever? I mean, you really got to sort of hunker down and concentrate on like Waits was almost like the last century's Nine Inch Nails in a lot of ways.
Yeah, you got to see this interview. He's in Australia. I think it's an Australian talk show, like 1980, and it serves as acting reference for Heath Ledger, I think, and it's unbelievable.
Really,
I mean, it is essentially the Joker. Yeah,
like essentially, he wasn't explicitly saying, "I'm channeling the Joker now."
No. Just how he was. It looks like it feels like you're watching Heath Ledger in 2008's Dark Knight.
Huh.
Yeah,
wow.
Just the speech pattern and the way his mind seems to work. It's very interesting.
Oh, very cool. But to go back to Jethro Tull, are you a prog rock fan then, Peter? Like you like the King Crimson and
not as I mean, King
stuff?
Crimson didn't leave as much of a legacy. I mean, in a lot of ways they're more highly regarded, but they don't have as many albums out. Yeah, I guess I'm a progger from way back. I mean, I was also a huge fan of Yes until their lyrics stopped being so arcane that I didn't know what they were singing about, and I could pretend it was profound.
Mm-hmm.
And then they just started singing straight ahead, "Love is the answer," flower power lyrics, and I thought, okay, still like your music, guys, but sorry, I'm looking for a little more depth lyrically.
Mm-hmm.
Tull always had that ability to be both cerebral and vulgar at the same time. Anderson's lyrics have these great little turns of phrase. "Pulls his eyes over her wool" is a great one. I mean, the man's lyrics, I think, are just terrific. I don't know.
I don't actually know him that well. I should listen to his stuff.
The Jethro Tull is actually the name of an 18th century agriculturalist who invented something called the seed drill.
Yeah.
The group is headed by Ian Anderson, who's their main flautist and lyricist. And
where are they from?
They're British.
British. Okay.
And
I know the name, and like I loosely know the music. I just don't.
They got the name. I don't think this is apocryphal. It was like basically they were so bad that the only way they could get repeat bookings in the same venue was to keep changing their name. And they had worked their way back to 18th century agriculturalists, and they were calling themselves Jethro Tull the first time anybody ever asked to see them again.
Oh yeah.
So that was the name that stuck.
Oh, that's funny.
As a matter of fact, I've quoted Jethro Tull in a number of my novels, and ended up getting, I had to pay Chrysalis permission to use them as epigrams, but it was well worth it. I got like a 1-letter note of thanks from Ian Anderson, which I would kill either one of my stepdaughters to protect. I don't even look at it anymore. It's just in a safe deposit box somewhere.
Oh, Peter, you're hilarious, man. Oh. We got to get into some Blindside stuff here, and I got to tell you guys that we read this for our book club last year, and when Kevin recommended that we read this, he said, "You've got to pay attention. If you miss a little, you can miss a lot." And I just want to know, Neill, what was your experience reading Blindside?
Well, I mean, I found it really. It's interesting because there was a whole bunch of topics that I've been increasingly more interested in over the last few years that seem to just suddenly all be condensed into one book, like some sort of balsamic reduction. And it was a very strange experience, actually. So I'm working on a video game project right now with Richard Morgan, and we were just talking about science fiction in general. And he said, "Have you checked out Blindside?" And I hadn't. And he was like, you need to go and like get off this call and go and read Blindside. So I did. And, from pretty much the very first, the first scene pretty much where he explains how his parents had his, half of his brain scooped out. I was like, okay, this is quite fascinating. And then just goes down the rabbit hole with more and more topics that I have just been, really fascinated with in the last couple of years. And it just I loved it. I loved every single piece about it. But I think the thing that I was probably most interested in would be either just the concept of these vampires that Peter came up with, or the kind of larger idea of consciousness being some sort of maladaptive, era, or the idea that over time with a brain sort of expanding, eventually the idea of I or self sort of dissolves away until it's processing in a way that's sort of too great for those ideas to hold together. So yeah, I just absolutely loved it. And then I started reading Echopraxia after I started speaking to Peter, and that also just has a whole bunch of amazing stuff in it.
We always look at Peter's work as hard science fiction. Mm-hmm. Like as a filmmaker, what are the challenges that you face in bringing hard science fiction into screen?
I mean, filmmaking is such a weird art form because it requires so many dollars to bring it into reality, and so because of the amount of dollars that are required, there's kind of a separation between what would be the coolest thing to just do versus what studios will pay for you to do. And this is constant tug of war, and that's why you end up with such boring, predictable movies, because it's just the nature of how economics work. So if there was some sort of magic ATM that just spat out tens of millions of dollars that you could turn movies out of the cash that it was giving you, Blindsight, the full novel, would be an amazing, completely amazing world to dive into. What I think that when you have these ideas that studios have in their heads about likable characters and 3-act structures and sort of some level of predictability for the audience, it starts becoming more challenging to get a lot of the deeper, bigger ideas and concepts across in the way that you can in a novel. So I mean, I think it would make an incredible film if it was allowed to be the film that it should be. Mm-hmm. I could see it being, just kind of chipped away, studio meeting by studio meeting.
And so with that in mind, it's Sarasti that we're going to be following more, and that seems to be, like you said, the studios find a character like that interesting, and the concept of this character interesting.
Peter should talk about it, because I'm not sure how much he's wants to let go about the idea of what he's making with Blindsight, right? Where I'm not involved with the adaptation of Blindsight as a feature film. I went to Peter with an idea to do with the incredible vampire kind of lineage that he came up with. I zeroed in on Sarasti, and then asked Peter, like, could this be taken as a concept, a sort of origin story of how the vampires came to be? Is that something that we could possibly take from this world that you've created and then tell it in a very near future, like a 2028 kind of future, with the beginning of the gene trials of how these creatures came to be? And he sent me this YouTube video that he made that I don't know if you guys have seen, which is super cool, that explains the sort of pharmaceutical company researching on death row inmates. And he also sent me a write-up of what seemed like just kind of like an accurate sort of scientific paper on how it would work, which was like kind of exactly, I just sent an email saying, like, what more information can I get? And he was like, why don't you try these 2 things out? And it was like, wow, that's kind of exactly what I was hoping for and more. So he's obviously thought it through.
It's called Taming Yesterday's Nightmares for a Better Tomorrow.
So, Peter, how did that come to be? I can't believe I haven't asked you this. Why and how does that video exist?
Well, I've been playing around with the idea of vampires ever since, like, I guess
the Comic-Con panel.
Almost a turn of the. I don't think it was Comic-Con. It was some little dick-ass thing in Edmonton. But I was creating. I was guest of honor at a local con, and that meant I had to give some kind of a keynote address. And Blindsight wasn't out yet. And Behemoth had tanked like a panzer, but Blindsight was coming out, and it had I put a fair amount of biology to it, but people also regard me as kind of a Debbie Downer, and I'm this nihilistic, grim Yeah, I was looking at the dark side of things kind of guy. By reputation, I totally dispute that characterization. But anyhow, I thought I'd do something a little more upbeat, and the idea of human experiments on death row inmates and autistic children struck me as
seemed hilarious.
yeah, it was a kind of a lightening up a little bit. So I basically, rather than standing up and giving a boring 45-minute talk about how I became a science fiction writer and why my career was about to go down the drain, I basically just decided to channel this second-rate flack for a big pharmaceutical company trying to share the stockholders on the fact that they'd accidentally killed this autistic kid as a result of some of their clinical trials. But hey, they'd figured out the genetic basis for vampires, and we can monetize this. So I gave a 40-minute talk full of great little Pfizer Farm homilies like flexible ethics for a complex world and cute little cartoons. They're basically the kind of things that you get from pharmaceutical companies that are trying to appear as though they care. And I gave that at this talk I gave this talk, and it went over very well, but it was a small, obscure con. And I gave it again, I guess, down at by request down at ReaderCon back when I was still allowed to go into the States. And after that, I guess somebody threw it up. I had it on my website, but it needed a Flash plugin, so somebody translated it into something that was more compatible.
It and put it on YouTube.
Yeah, and I should probably bring it back down to mine, but it was fun. It was very tongue in cheek. And when you came to me and said, "Hey, let's do something based on this, but it'll kind of be like Sicario," and I was like, there's a lot of jokes in this. It's like kind of Sicario and the Holy Grail. Is that what we're going for here?
Yeah. But I mean, you can separate out just the pure data that's in there.
I find it. I mean, it's a fascinating idea because vampires are just absolutely inane from any kind of biological perspective. They make no sense. They're they're the dumbest of the supernatural entities, with the possible exception of werewolves. So it was, the idea of being able to take something that's that absurd and trying to hand wave something that even sounds halfway biologically plausible. It was this great little exercise. It was like a brain teaser. I'm crap at crosswords or Sudoku or anything, but this was something I could sink my teeth into. So I just basically took all the tropes of the classic vampire myth and tried to come up with scientific explanations for them. Yeah. And it's all still bullshit, but it really hangs together better than I expected it to. Better than I actually relate to.
That's what I was, it was a really interesting thing for me because every page of the novel, I wanted to know more about the history of these things and how they came to be. And when Peter sent this, it was like it very much is set in a world where it's a pharmaceutical company you could imagine today in 2021 doing some Texas style gene exploration. And the video that he made has this, it almost feels like it would be playing on some crappy projector in like a convention center somewhere with people drinking coffee out of like styrofoam cups. But if you start thinking of that like as something along the lines of Silence of the Lambs, like this kind of more serious take on, because he's basically describing a completely sociopathic serial killer that is an apex predator that's just way outside the realm of any kind of human we've ever run into before, but is kind of human-esque. It's the most compelling villain character ever. It's like an amazing villain. So and as cool as Blindside is, I just wanted to make something that felt contemporary and kind of nowish. And I think in the lineage, because Blindside's set in like 2082, right?
Yeah, that's when it starts.
So it's now-ish seems like when you would start going through those trials, maybe, to have them be commonplace in society then. Yeah.
The timing worked out really well, too, because all the IP had been optioned. Like, these guys didn't just want Blindsight. I don't think they're going to make any other movies, even if they make Blindsight, but they just basically wanted every aspect of the Blindsight universe, every short story I had written and so on. But they'd forgotten to renew the option. So it expired. And they'd invested in it. They wanted to renew, but all of a sudden the rights were back in my hands. And so it was very straightforward to like renegotiate this deal, carving out a little section for making speculative biology standalone that, you know, is taken from the universe but doesn't involve the actual characters. So everything really sort of came together. It was you, Neill, came to me about like 3 weeks before the option expired, and then we just sort of waited there with our fingers crossed, hoping that they wouldn't notice that the deadline was sneaking up on them. And you know, breathed this huge sigh of relief once the option period had expired and we had received no money. And then there was this, you know, because of COVID, maybe nobody was in the office and maybe the check was sitting in somebody's mailbox and nobody had picked it up yet. And that was a whole other bit of tenterhooks. But ultimately, it turned out that they just forgotten to pay and they wanted to pay. So we argued from a position of strength. And now here we are. I am working on a concept with the guy behind District 9, maybe District 10.
And Chappie.
Which I just found out has way more going for it than when I saw it. I just you should probably tell them about that, Neill. That was a hellaciously ambitious film.
I was explaining to Peter that for all of the flack I took for Chappie, which, you know, maybe fair, the goal with it wasn't really an AI film. It was a film that was meant to be about these philosophical concepts or even Gnostic concepts of like the act of existing, the act of birth into the physical world kind of makes you impure. And so AI was a metaphor for a soul. Could have been a baby, could have been a human. But by becoming sentient, by becoming material, you sort of begin this process of decay and you know, defilement in the world. And I wanted to take those concepts and marry them up against the most irreverent, insane, you know, Die Antwoord seemed like a bunch of South African rappers would be a completely, it would be so far away from those deeper philosophical concepts that these two things that should never exist together, like that was what the enjoyment of the film was to me, was that those two things were in fact existing together in a way that they shouldn't. And most people rejected those two, you know, I don't know whether it's two tones, but those two ideas living inside of the same box. So, right. Yeah. But I mean, in order to have to explain it for people to get it is maybe not the best thing.
Well, that's interesting to know. So who did put Aaron Stewart on the screenplay? Who?
No, that's a different project. I'm not related to that at all. Like, I didn't even know that was happening. I just went to Peter and said, like, can I get this vampire to work on? And he was already making Blindsight with this other production studio. So, Peter, like, another question that I want to ask you, which is weird given all the jitsy sessions that we do, that I haven't asked you, is how did you get arrested by the Americans?
Ever wondered what it takes to make it in the movie business? Peel back the curtain with 4-6 Success Filmmaking. 4-6 Success Filmmaking is where filmmakers share their stories and the secrets.
It's beyond competitive out there.
There have been movies that it's taken me 10 years to get made.
Don't wait to create. Like, you've got to just keep making stuff.
Tune into 4-6 Success Filmmaking for your dose of cinematic realness, direct from the voices that have lived it.
Oh yeah, that. Did I tell you guys about that last time?
You told me about how you were arrested in Canada when you were on your bike.
Oh yeah,
but you didn't tell me the American part. Did that happen after the bike in Canada?
Yeah. No, the connection between that, the thing on the bike happened in 1991.
Okay.
The thing in the States happened in 2009.
Oh, okay, way later. Right.
And I just want to make sure that we're not boring the audience here. Have I told you guys about this last time I was on?
Yeah, we didn't get details, but I think you alluded to something, but we didn't get the details. So
it doesn't feel like a subject we get tired of hearing again.
I mean, it does sound interesting. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So yeah, it was pretty fucking weird. I was helping a friend move to Nebraska. And we were told to avoid the Port Huron crossing into the U.S. because these guys were assholes. So we used a different, we went through Detroit on the way down. Coming on the way back, we were running away from the first major gale winter storm of the year. And so we basically wanted to shave as much time off as possible because we did not want to get caught under whiteout conditions. So we went back through Port Huron, and we figured, hey, no problem. We won't be dealing with the assholes because they're on the American side, right? And you always encounter customs. You get stopped by the guys who are guarding the country that you are entering. Mm-hmm. And we were going home. So we're driving by, and there's the bridge. It's 2 kilometers. We're 2 kilometers from the Canadian border, and there's these people in uniform sort of clustered off to one side, and one of them waves at me, and I wave back. Keep going. And my passenger says, I think they wanted you to pull over. And that struck me as odd. So I said, okay. So I pull over, and this woman stomps up to the door and says, when I wave at you, it doesn't just mean that I'm trying to say hello. It means I want you to stop. And I said, well, we obviously come from different cultures, because, where I come from, when you wave at somebody, that frequently does mean hello. So she wanted to see the papers, and she wanted to see all this other stuff. And I was, trying to be my usual charming self, and asked her why we were being pulled over. And eventually I look around, and I see that they're going through the back of the van. And that's not actually legal. They have to ask permission to go through the stuff, and they were just doing this. Uh-huh. So I turned to ask her what's going on, but she has left. She is actually now at the back of, she's back with everybody else. So I get out of the car, and this is the point at which things start to go south. All of a sudden, they're all sort of surrounding me, telling me to get back in the car. And I say, I just want to know what's going on.
Yeah.
And get back in the car. And I said, no, I'm not, threatening anybody here. Although during the actual trial, they tried to say that I was assuming an aggressive stance, because the door, of course, of the vehicle was open like this. So because I was standing in that V-shaped, I had to sort of be angled this way, right? I couldn't face them on. So they assumed that I was taking this aggressive stance. And I'm not exactly sure how things spiraled out of control. But, this was Officer Beaudry from basically the other side of the tarmac comes running over and basically inserts himself, starts threatening me.
It's amazing how quickly it escalates.
I end up back in the car at this point, and he's in the car with me, punching me in the face. And now before they wanted me out of the car. Now they want me out of the car, or they wanted me in the car. Now they want me out of the car. I asked them to make up their minds. Finally, I get out of the car.
Jesus.
They told me to get onto the pavement. I said, what is the problem? Get on the pavement or we'll mace you. I said, what is the problem? And so at this point, they maced me. And apparently, and this was something else that they cited in, one of the reasons they said I was on meth was because they maced me and I didn't basically curl up and cry like a baby. But
did they say that you were on meth?
Yeah. Well, this was one of there was a whole fucking, it was all over the internet. I also picked up one of the guards with my bare hands and hurled her across the tarmac one-handed, which was another reason that I was on meth, and I was able to fend off all these heavily armed. Anyhow, you could see that it was pretty obvious they were going to spray me, so I closed my eyes. So the impact was muted, shall we say. And then I kind of wiped my eyes, and eventually I got down on the ground, and they handcuffed me and dragged me off to wherever they were. I basically was keeping my eyes closed. At this point, I was starting to suffocate, because even though I had closed my eyes, I was hyper salivating. I was producing mucus because of the spray, right?
It's like tear gas.
Yeah. So I basically asked if somebody would blow my nose for me, right? Of course, this was not part of their purview. So I started blowing my own nose. Like my hands were tied, so I just had to. At which point I was told that if any of my snot hit any of the officers, I would be charged with assault. They couldn't really, I mean, I guess they just assumed that because I was asking what was going on. I mean, basically what's happened is that the expectation of reasonable communication between the sheep and the people who keep us in line has been criminalized. So if you ask questions, you are by definition behaving suspiciously.
Right.
And this is anyhow what they went with. They didn't find anything. Oh, they tried to bring Homeland Security into it. Homeland Security came up and interrogated. They wanted me to sign this sort of thing saying that I had
came up to Canada. You mean like later?
No. I was
like
I was
right
being
then.
held at this point. They brought Homeland Security up from Detroit. I was I could probably sum this up a lot more effectively.
It doesn't sound great. I mean,
If
it's more
you-
intense than I thought it was going to be.
Oh yeah, no, it's.
I didn't realize you got like pepper sprayed and stuff. And,
Yeah, no, I was basically spent the night in a, as the token white guy and in an unheated cell in the onset of the first major winter storm. They tried to fingerprint me, but they had this digital fingerprint machine which they had bought from the brother of one of the security guards, and he had died of a heart attack the year before, so nobody knew how to calibrate the damn thing anymore. I was scared shitless because nobody knew I was down here, and if they did, what were they going to do? But what it turned out was that having phoned Caitlin, and Caitlin phoned the guy who happened to be the head of the press gallery at the Toronto Star, or the head of the Toronto Press Gallery, he used to be a friend of mine. And basically the internet woke up, and these people the jail started getting phone calls from various newspapers and so on. Not because I count for anything, but because, Cory Doctorow is a friend of mine, and Neil Gaiman is a friend of Cory Doctorow, and so on. But they had me in, I paid my bail. I thought I was going to leave the next day, but instead of leaving, they put me in general population. So I spent, some time in general pop. They don't give you pillows there. Apparently people tend to stuff pillows down the toilet. So we slept on paperback books, 2 of which were old advanced review copies from my old publisher Tor. So I could sleep on those.
Why do people stuff toilet? Why are they putting pillows in the toilet?
I don't know. This is one of those jails for profit, right?
Probably
For
to
all
get
I
the
know, they're
door
still
open.
trying to send me bills for my accommodation. I finally, I was told by the guards, you can leave, but if you leave, they'll just arrest you again and arrest you under different charges. And yeah, I could see that when I finally was getting out, I could see them waiting.
Yeah.
With their handcuffs, ready to rearrest me. But I guess they got called off at the last moment. So they basically dumped me in shirt sleeves on the other side of the border, told me that they couldn't, take me back to the car because it was an impound lot, and the impound lot was closed, which is bullshit. It was a 24-hour impound lot. And, at that point, the legend was kind of born. Homeland Security had come up, and they'd interviewed me. They wanted me to sign this little thing saying that I had not been, waiving certain rights and saying that I had not been intimidated. And I pointed out that this entire process had been an act of intimidation from the start. So was anybody actually stupid enough to sign this?
Yeah.
I said, I'd be happy to sign it if you can let me make some edits. That didn't work out. So yeah,
And you still can't go back now. You can't go
I can't go back. Yeah, no, as a matter of fact, the judge ended up saying that I was the kind of guy that he wanted to have a beer with. 2 members of the jury stood with me they basically, the prosecution, there was no act because this was not an actual official border stop, right? I was still 2 kilometers from the border.
Yeah.
According to U.S. law, the border is 100 miles in. So if you happen to live in Potsdam, New York, and they kick in your door at 3 a.m, there's not a hell of a lot you can do about it because that's Border Patrol. And Border Patrol is not constrained by the same laws that constrain actual law enforcement, despite the fact that they've had 3 weeks of summer camp training in Virginia. They don't have nearly the training that actual policemen do, but they have far, far more power. So the prosecution what they had a series of still photos that were taken once every 3 or 4 seconds from one of their spy boxes. So they tried to play that, but they ended up slowing it down so that it looked like the time between me asking what is the problem? And the time that I got onto the pavement, they tried to make it look as long as possible so that they could do the whole non-compliance thing.
Yeah.
The guards couldn't get the story straight. Bodge said he came running over because he saw that I was resisting arrest, but the previous guard had said that she'd never gotten around to trying to arrest me. There was another guard who said she didn't see any of the things that I was accused of doing. She had been like, she just hadn't noticed it, but she was always sitting away from the other guards and they weren't talking to her. It was totally fucked up. And the juror who stood with me actually wrote a letter to the judge on my behalf saying we had to vote to convict because the law is written that way, but it's a stupid law. For one thing, the statute, basically it says it covers everything from failing to comply with a lawful command to attacking someone with a chainsaw. It's all the same felony.
Mm-hmm.
The statute spends 3 paragraphs describing what a person is. There isn't a single word on what constitutes a lawful command. So if some asshole with a badge says, get down on your hands and knees and bark like a dog, and you don't, is that a lawful command? It's kind of a leg hold trap of a piece of legislation. So this is what I was charged with. When I was found guilty, the woman who stood with me, the juror, was subjected to an ongoing campaign of police harassment. They basically arrested her kids. They broke into her house. They took her kids away without telling her where her kids were. They kicked her dog. They trashed. She was Native American, so they did all sorts of things to various indigenous tobacco and feather and so on. Like basically, they were parking outside her house. She was never charged. Like her whole entire family was frog marched down, booked, fingerprinted, never charged with anything. Mm-hmm. The argument was that they thought that she had possibly been involved in a robbery of one of those those payday cash loan places, despite the fact that security camera footage showed that the culprit had been a middle-aged man with a beard. And because she did trapping, their argument was that she had probably killed a raccoon and fashioned a fake beard out of the fur. This was why she was a suspect. Fortunately, because half the internet woke up and paid for my defense, I had enough money left over so that I could actually pay her mortgage a couple of months, because for her, it was a question of either paying a lawyer or paying for the house. And again, she had voted to convict. She just stood with me in support at my trial. That's where the bike event gets into it, because what they were doing was they were looking for an excuse to consider me a repeat offender so that they could double the jail time.
And they had access to the Canadian files.
They had access to the Canadians don't even have access to that file. This is me in 1991 at 2 a.m, turning right on a red light without coming to a complete stop at a deserted intersection while riding a bicycle. I wasn't even riding.
You asshole.
And
what a psycho.
And when the cop at Guelph pulled me over, my question was, do I have to show you ID? I'm not riding a vehicle, so I've got no cause to have ID on me.
It's unclear. Wait, do I have to show you?
What
ID?
are my rights and obligations? Know. And that kind of escalated too, because then it was like he was gonna haul me in, and I was okay. I'm gonna let me disconnect the light on my belt. Oh, we're not gonna let you go back there because you could have a knife stashed there. Okay. Basically, this is one of those gel-powered bicycle lights where doesn't have a switch. You have to yank the electrodes off the battery, and the battery was in a little pack behind the seat. So it's like, oh no, you could have a knife in there. Okay, you do it. No, I'm not going to do it. So at that point, I basically said, look, I'm not resisting arrest, but I am going to, but I don't want to get, charged again for driving home without a light. Mm-hmm. So I am going to disconnect this bicycle light, and I'm not going to be stopped by some microcephalic mesomorph trying to make a quota. So at that point, they called for backup, and I got wrestled down, and I tickled them because I knew if I hit them, I would be charged with assault. So I just started tickling them. And that kind of, but anyhow, it was such a trivial, stupid event.
Isn't a mesomorph just just an athletic build, or what does that mean? Yeah.
But microcephalic means very, very small of brain.
Right.
Both of these things were true.
Yeah.
They're not mutually exclusive.
Yeah.
So anyhow, that was I got a conditional discharge on that. It was, it was I spent a night in jail, and the guy next to me was singing Pink Floyd all night, which was, harkens back to the beginning of our talk.
Well, it sucked.
But anyhow, the Canadian judicial system didn't even have a record of that.
Yeah.
We went looking. It's nowhere, because it was purged. The record is purged. It was bullshit. It was a bullshit charge. Obstruct justice. But the Americans fucking knew.
Yeah.
20 years later, the Americans knew, and they tried to have it invoked as a piece of evidence that I was a habitual offender. There's something I can show you in here. Where is it?
So, like, just talking about mesomorphs for a second, like with the evolutionary background that you have, when you're talking about things like ectomorphs versus what's the largest sort of like body fat percentage body type?
Endomorph. I mean, these are completely obsolete terms, right? Nobody actually uses them anymore.
But from a sort of selection, like survival of the fittest standpoint, shouldn't there be no ectomorphs? Shouldn't there be no one that's lean?
Well, it depends. I mean, it depends on what you're, if you are in a hot environment, you want to be lean because you want to maximize your surface area to volume ratio. Here we go.
But you could have long periods with no food, though.
Yeah, but again, that's, if you're fat, again, a lot of this depends on.
So the argument, like evolutionarily speaking, is that you'd be able to hunt better.
Well, a lot of this depends again on the environment, right? There are human cultures where being grotesquely obese is a status symbol.
But culture is downstream from where initially those biological paradigms came from, though, right?
I think things tend to be a little more. I think we tend to shy away from recognizing that we're mammals. I do think to some extent culture reflects underlying biology, which is not to excuse it. There's a lot of shitty stuff about. I mean, we've got into the mess we're in by behaving naturally.
Mm-hmm.
So by saying that our culture reflects certain natural animalistic inclinations, I mean the sexual double standard that women have to put up with, for example, you can come up with all sorts of biological hand waving to explain that. Whether it's true or not is almost beside the point. Because even if it is true, it's not an excuse for doing that shit now. Capitalism, greed, the fact that so many of us want to devour all the sugar we can, because back on the Pleistocene, high calorie foods were rare, and now
it's still built in. It's like
we're following these legacy drives, these legacy imperatives, and as a result, because we are now in a different environment and our drives haven't edited themselves, we're all dying of tooth rot and diabetes and moribund obesity.
Or putting food away for winter that results in you being a billionaire.
Yeah. And also, I think a problem is we tend to reset our satiation thresholds. If you are living in poverty, the idea of getting 3 square meals a day is all you want. Once you're getting guaranteed 3 square meals, you want a house. Once you've got a house, you constantly. This is sort of why I think this is why Jeff Bezos wants to go to space, because he's got everything else, right? And he's legitimately emotionally feels the same need to go to the next level as some poor bastard who doesn't get 3 meals a day aspires to the 3 meals a day. You constantly reset your horizons. But let me just, this kind of comes back together with both movie making and with my interaction with the U.S. border authorities, because a couple of years back, I had an opportunity to actually go down and write the pilot for a Blindside-based series. It ultimately fell through, but I had to. At that point, there was a question of getting back into the States, so I hired an immigration lawyer, and everything worked up until I had to write this letter of remorse. They make you write a letter of remorse if you want to get back into the States, and they give you a template on how you should write this letter of remorse, right? Back in fill in the blank, I made some very foolish mistakes, and I have been tormented ever since by guilt over the horrible things I have done. And now I have married a wonderful woman, and I teach basketball, and I go to my local church. And so basically, this is what they wanted me to fill in order to go back to the States. And I could not bring myself to really apologize for having been punched in the face. So I wrote a letter of remorse to whom it may concern. I am requesting and applying for a waiver to enable me to go to the United States of America. Back in 2009, While trying to leave the U.S. after helping an expat return to the States, I was pulled over at Port Huron, Michigan for an exit search that violated the Border Patrol's own stated protocols. Having led a sheltered life, I failed to think about the power dynamics at work in authoritarian systems and the extent to which the U.S. has criminalized the expectation of reasonable communication between civilians and the authorities who keep them in check. I therefore approached one of the officers to ask what was going on. I had no intention of provoking hostilities. I neither raised my voice nor used incendiary language. But of course, the very act of asking questions is considered provocation in such situations. I was ultimately convicted under Michigan statute MCL 750.81D bracket 1N bracket 4, as the prosecuting attorney convincingly argued in her closing argument, failing to immediately get on the ground after having been punched in the face. Fortunately, the judge in that case chose to ignore the prosecutor's request for jail time and released me with a small fine, remarking that I was the kind of guy he'd like to have a beer with. I like to regard this small endorsement as evidence that my rehabilitation was already underway. Enclosed with my application are reference letters from accomplished professionals in a number of disciplines. You need to have at least 3 character references: law, finance, journalism, science, engineering, literature, even from one of those jurors at my trial who stood at my side during sentencing in a show of support, and whose family was subsequently subjected to an ongoing campaign of police harassment for reasons which I'm certain are completely unrelated. I also include a CV detailing the degrees I've learned, the awards I've won, the books, articles, stories, and scientific papers I've written, the 20 languages into which my work has been translated, the courses in which my work is taught, and the impact my work has had in fields ranging from philosophy to computer science to video games. These documents speak to who I am now, and, while unlikely to confer the sort of credibility you might attach to a border guard with 13 weeks of training under their belt, perhaps they'll give you hope that I may yet become a productive member of society. I have learned and grown a great deal since that unfortunate altercation at the Blue Water Bridge. I understand now that the brave members of the Border Patrol daily risk their lives to protect your citizenry from people like, well, me. Right up to and including that member of the Port Huron detachment who, just days after my arrest, was himself arrested for possession of child pornography. And then I have a footnote pointing to the arrest record of that person. I should have realized that it was a mistake to approach the guards on an equal footing as fellow human beings. As a former biologist, I should have known that the only appropriate response would be that practiced by subordinate members of other primate species: avoidance of eye contact, servile posture, and reflexive, unquestioning obedience to all commands, no matter how perplexing. Realizing my error, I have chosen to follow the lead of that great American Harry Whittington, who, after being shot in the face by then Vice President Dick Cheney, actually held a press conference to apologize to Cheney for the incident. In that spirit, I would like to express my sincere remorse that I have caused to re-enter the U.S., especially at a time when so many of your countrymen appear to be going the other way. If you grant me the requested waiver, however, I promise that I will not stay a fucking moment longer than is absolutely necessary. Sincerely, Peter Watts.
How'd that go, Peter?
I'm sure it went over well. Yeah.
Well, the immigration attorney really was not very happy with it, so it never actually got forwarded on, and I am still
Should just put it online or something.
I am still unable to. Well, it's online now.
I say you just copy and paste to get on the Joe Rogan show.
Somebody actually posted it on Reddit a while back, but they got all the formatting wrong. So I don't know. So yeah, that's basically where things stand now. I'm still not allowed to go back in the States. They have a vial of something that they think is my DNA, although it actually contains about half a dozen different species, including a kind of tropical cactus and a couple of endangered birds.
Like that you had to submit.
Yeah, well, this is the thing, right? I'm banned from the U.S.,
Hilarious.
but they still wanted a DNA sample. And I knew some people at the Royal Ontario Museum's molecular genetics lab.
Oh, that's hilarious.
So before I went into the local police precinct here to provide a DNA swab, I got them to mix up this sort of DNA puree using a whole bunch of different species and just kind of sluiced my mouth out with it before they took the cheek swab. I mean, it probably still didn't matter. I mean, it was a small volume compared to like my actual inside of my cheek, right? But the whole thing about polymerase chain reaction is that it takes tiny pieces and multiplies, and it's basically a photocopier for bits of DNA. So who knows? Maybe they, they're terrified of me down there because I'm man bear pig or something.
Yeah, it could fractal down on like some endangered bird and scale that up like 100 times more than the human DNA, and
I have
that would be a
idea.
win.
Given the level of scientific expertise down there, I'd be surprised if they even knew how to sequence the fucking thing.
Neil, I think you should do this as an experimental short for Oat Studios and release it.
The entire thing,
The entire thing, yeah. You'd have to take certain points though, and it's tell
like
the story,
like a Ted Chiang short story or something. Like especially when it ends with the multiple species DNA sample.
Mm-hmm. That's right.
Yeah, that was a lot. Like that was way more intense than I thought it was going to be. I thought you just got, I don't know, but that was.
Yeah, no, I mean, I thought I was going to be disappeared. And the weird thing is ever since I moved, they haven't been able to catch up with me. But I kept getting a bill for my time spent in the Port Huron jail.
Yeah, that's amazing.
They charged me $36 a night, like I was in a fucking Motel 6 or something.
Yeah,
and this is how these jails for profit actually operate, right? Because most people don't live out of country, so these guys get charged like $36 a night. They're in jail for 2 years. They come out, they're tens of thousands of dollars in debt. Who's going to hire them? They're a con.
It's amazing how many parts of that society have this broken capitalistic element to it that's just sort of run amok.
It's broken by design. That's the fucked up thing about it. It's not like the system isn't working. The system is working exactly as it is intended to.
Yeah, it's purpose built to keep poor people poor.
Yeah. I've got or at least working on chain guns. Where the hell did
I'm telling you, I think it could work well. Dystopian inequality. There's something there for you, Neil. There's something that you can put together and do a movie.
Does feel like an interesting topic.
Tell me about Oat Studio. Do you you were trying to releasing shorts on Steam? Is that still going on?
Yeah, I mean, we're not at the moment. We're not making or releasing anything. We're trying to figure out how to financially make it self-sufficient so that it can keep doing what it was doing, and that seems to be. Like there's some interesting stuff on the horizon that may essentially what I want to do is I want to create a place where we can just kind of make whatever we feel like making and put it out to an audience and not really have to justify too much stuff, which is very different to how Hollywood normally works. So it just requires thinking about different kinds of revenue models of how that may work. And there is actually some interesting stuff now that we're starting to get into that may yield a way to be able to go back and continue doing it. I love this stuff. The whole period of Oats was super cool. I mean, we had a whole bunch of people that were very talented artists in different fields, and the idea for it was kind of like this, almost like a warehouse that would just make films. Where everything was under one roof, which is not really how the film industry operates. Like the film industry is normally a bunch of nomads that come together for one film in one particular configuration, and then they're broken apart and they go off, and that exact configuration will never return again. And Oats was meant to be a place where everyone, like a lot actually, like a video game studio or something like Pixar, a classical or computer animation studio, where no one really leaves the job. Like they're all under the banner of Pixar. And I just wanted to do that with live action, and then I also wanted to do it in a way that it wasn't making traditional films that have all of the sort of traditional requirements and traditional releases about them.
It's like an innovation lab. You see that at tech companies all the time. You throw something against the wall, see what sticks. I mean, it's a good model. I think it takes a little bit of leap of faith, eh?
Mm-hmm. Well, there's also one other element, which is if you're throwing stuff at a wall and seeing what's sticking, whatever sticks, I don't want to have turned into something that's made in Hollywood. It's never meant to touch Hollywood in any way. So if people think Raka is cool, it's like Raka shouldn't be made into a film within Hollywood. It should exist kind of like the way the first one exists. Just
Why? Just because it has a short?
Because as soon as you're in Hollywood, you're talking about 3-act structures and a very particular running time, and it comes with its own set of boxed in parameters. So and you kind of watch films and TV expand and contract depending on what the given technology of the era is. Like black and white sitcoms were sort of radio plays initially, because coming out of radio, people didn't really know what television was, and then it evolves, and it's like you watch that happen again and again and again. So something like Steam or something like YouTube I mean, less Steam now. That was part of the problem. Was Steam killed video on their system,
Right.
which is what led to a bunch of issues with us. But something like YouTube, it's like it can be whatever length you want it to be. It can be anything you want. And if you think of large science fiction worlds, that seems like a very interesting way to look at it. That it could be 2 minutes, it could be 5 minutes, it could be 8 hours, it could be 2 hours and 17 minutes, it could be anything. So, and if you want to go down the road of one character or show the audience one piece of one room, like you can do whatever you want. And that's exactly what Oates was meant to be. And that doesn't fit Hollywood. It's just not interesting to make like a 2-hour film out of that.
Yeah, there's some interesting stuff. Dust is this great clearinghouse of amazing sci-fi stuff on YouTube, and I kept thinking about that when I was reading about what you were doing with Oates. I think that takes from all sorts of different locations, but certainly the ability to do what you're saying, really innovative, really neat stuff in shorter form is so compelling. It's innovating around the business model. I think there's lots of opportunity to disrupt there.
Yeah, it's obviously difficult. I mean, those films were incredibly cost effective. Like something like Raqqa as a feature would be at minimum $50 to $60 million. And if you scaled up how we made Raqqa, it would have cost between 10 to 12 million. So it's like about $100,000 to $125,000 per minute of content, right? Which is really, really low. But another way of looking at it is Raqqa costs between 2 to 3 million. So it's like, okay, well, where does 2 to 3 million come from each time you want to make one?
Yeah.
So as long as you can figure out a way, because there's no ad revenue from YouTube that would ever pay for that.
No.
So, but there is actually a way to make that work, and the audience could potentially still get it for free.
What is that way, if I may ask?
It's I need to first do it to see if it works. I can't really talk. I'm in the middle of talking to these partners that may help me do that. So I don't want to give away my secrets yet.
Awesome. I'm excited about that.
I just want to circle back because you've both talked about sort of self-made threats to humanity, and in terms of vampires or AI. And obviously AI is AI a threat?
I don't actually know whether I truly in my core believe that AI is a threat any more than anything else that everything that we seem to make is just a double-edged sword that that seems like it could be highly detrimental and highly positive. So I'm not sure that we'll snuff ourselves out of existence because some AI program did something detrimental to the human race. I'm way more skeptical, I think, about other humans. They could misuse AI, but I think it would be much easier and much more predictable to do something that would be some kind of more traditional terrorist attack. I think a bigger threat is ourselves in the sense of like overpopulation and just using resources to the point that the system can't sustain it anymore, and then having some kind of Malthusian collapse in terms of resources and the economy starting to stutter and then break down, and then the society breaks down once the economy breaks down, and I think that's quite realistic. But I don't know in my core being if I believe that it's going to be because some rogue AI just went mental and fractured the whole system. What do you think, Peter?
Yeah, I agree with you pretty much down the line. I think that in the near future, our major problem is not so much emergent AI as it is the assholes who control the AI to manipulate the rest of us and impoverish the rest of us. In the longer term, and I think we got into this a little bit in our last session about whether or not AIs would have survival instincts and so on. But in the longer term, again, along with Neill, I don't think it could be an issue because current models suggest that, following a business as usual trajectory, civilization will probably collapse around 2040. That will be the beginning of sort of a global infrastructure failure. The world's arable land is going to be completely exhausted by 2050. We thought we had until 2070, but it turned out we were too optimistic.
Is there stuff that you can do with that with synthetic like nitrogen and fertilizer? And I mean there must be some sort of additional years that we could squeeze out with technology.
You may be able to buy some time in terms of reinvigorating the soil.
Mm-hmm.
You also have to worry about the fact that there are a lot of plant pathogens out there. There's a kind of wheat rust that apparently is resistant to
A blight.
all forms of fungicide that's currently sort of creeping around the Mediterranean and the Middle East. And
Yeah.
I've seen suggestions that it could take out the entire world's wheat supply inside a decade.
But also that kind of thing actually, in a sense, doesn't really. It still doesn't matter, because even if you assume that there were no pandemics and no crop viruses and nothing that was a sort of outlier in that sense, even without any of those things, there are too many people putting too much strain on a system, even if it worked.
Yeah, I mean,
it's
we are the only continent that still has a positive growth rate is Africa. But the problem, of course, is that your average Africa dweller has a much smaller carbon footprint than your average North American. So even though there's far fewer than us, and even though our reproductive rate is essentially is starting to level off, one of us just sucks up so many resources that this is again where we get to a population peak around 2050, followed by a 40 to 50% collapse in the human population by the end of the century.
You know what is never cited with those carbon footprint statistics, though, is that North America is like basically very cold, and Africa isn't. And it's like there's like Canadians use more. They have a larger energy usage than Americans because more of Canada is freezing on a per capita basis. And so
That's
I mean,
true.
you could make the argument that maybe Africa would use more sort of air conditioning and go the other way. Maybe it's more like Texas or Florida, but it's still there's some disproportionate weirdness in that even at the same sort of GDP per capita, it may not be a 1-to-1.
Well, that's totally legitimate if you're trying to apportion blame. But if you're just talking about whether or not the system can support that kind of it doesn't really matter whether it's air conditioning or central heating. The system is still going off a cliff.
The system is still fucked. Yeah, no, it's true. Have you heard about that example that's given? I love this example where there was this island. It was I think it was in the South Pacific in World War II, and the Americans used it as a base, and they introduced there was some sort of game, like North American game, that they put on the island that they were using as venison basically for the troops. And when they left some kind of, I don't know what it was like deer or something that was not native to the area, and they were put there in the 40s. And some sort of biologists studied this foreign mammal grouping on this island, and the curve of their population basically was like an exponential rise. And then I think it was like the early 90s, it was something like there were a few hundred when the Americans left, and then by like 1980 there were 40 or 50,000, and then by 1991 there was like 58,000, and 1992 there were 3, and then the next year there was 0. And the point was that the sort of event horizon or the point of no return was like in like the 60s, where their population had gone beyond what this island could sustain.
Yeah.
And the point of the thing was like this is how many years you can go on afterwards where the ecosystem has absolutely no chance of sustaining you, but it seems like the party's still happening, and it's like you're just way beyond what the system will allow for, and then the drop off is so intense.
Yeah, it's something. It's a problem. I've seen a lot of people. I've sat on panels. I've corresponded with people. I've read editorials where the whole thing is like, but life is getting better all the time. Don't be such a gloomy Gus. It's like, and there are so many analogies you can use to counteract that. Like, a car is maintained a perfectly level trajectory for, 99% of its trajectory. It doesn't matter that it's, 2 meters away from a cliff now. You don't want to extend that line too far into the future and expect it to be realistic. And yeah, I think the credit cards are maxed out.
Maybe that's a good storyline for the vampire movie, Neil, is it's a survival mechanism. We bring these back to bring our population in line. This is we want these apex vampire predators because it might actually help us out, so we don't get to that.
We kind of we have a twisted version of that as one plot point right now that we're talking about. It's a little bit different to what you're describing, but it would be in the same area code.
Yeah, but of course we will say no more than that.
Yeah.
You pre-broke that here first, though, just for the record.
Yeah, just get my
without vampires. How many years do we have left, Peter? What do you think? Can we see it?
Yeah, no, I am not an expert. All I can do is read experts. I think it's telling that the IPCC had to leak. They felt they had to leak the second part of their report before it was supposed to be advanced because they were afraid that the political interests would downplay how serious the situation was.
But also, the end. It's the end. Maybe the end of civilization, but it's definitely not the end of the human race, though.
No, we're a pest species. We're everywhere.
Yeah, we're not going anywhere. It's just kind of like the structure now, the way that the world looks at the moment. Probably 100 years from now, it's not going to look the same way at all. But wasn't there an asteroid strike or something kind of around the ice age that brought the entire human species down to like 1,000 mating pairs? Do you know about this?
Yeah, there's something bottleneck, not Tunguska, but there's something other bottleneck.
No, it was way before Tunguska. I love that. That's a crazy asteroid impact story. But no, it was like 20 or 50,000 years ago, and the human population was brought down to the thing that I read was 1,000 mating pairs, and so you get this sort of, first of all, it constrains the genetics into whatever, it's just a massive sort of redirection, but that we survived that though, and that was without any technology. So
yeah, no, I think as a species, if you want to play PlayStation 5, you should probably get your licks in over the next few decades.
Just go hard, basically. Yeah. If you want to play Call of Duty, just really go to town.
But other than that, and I really, what are either of us, why do either of us sit in judgment when, you're working in a video game company, I'm working on a VR video game.
Oh no, I'm part of the problem. I'm not judging anything. I'm just like on the roller coaster ride. I'm like pushing the roller coaster. Yeah.
Yeah. At some point, I gotta say, for a large chunk of my writing career, such as it was, you could argue that while I try not to go too much into polemic, you could argue that the subtext of my books was, holy shit, people, we've got to slow this train down before we go off the edge. And then about, I don't know, over the past 5 or 6 years, the subtext has been more, go down with your teeth in the assholes' throats. Don't let them get away with it.
But the higher level takeaway for me is on a biological level that there may not be a reason or a justification for sentience at all.
Yeah. Intelligence is one thing. Obviously, you can see the advantage in problem solving.
Yeah.
And a lot of people disagree with us on that.
Self-awareness is the issue, though. Potentially, because it raises philosophical concepts then about the nature of why does anything exist? If nothing is here to observe it, then why does anything exist at all?
And that presupposes that there is a why. That presupposes some kind of universe that has a point or a purpose to it.
Yes.
And that's basically a religious perspective.
Yes, which I would subscribe to, I think.
Yeah.
Because otherwise there is no point.
But why does there have to be a point? The universe seems to be behaving according to the way it would if nobody was in charge.
Yes, which I agree with.
It's a completely indifferent universe.
Yes, I totally agree.
And in a situation like that, if we
weren't here to observe it, it wouldn't exist.
I guess my question is, do we need a point for things, or can we just say, okay, existence is meaningless except for the meaning that we attribute to it ourselves? I'm going to spend my life rescuing stray cats. I
agree with purpose. That. All I'm saying is that without attributing a point of view to it, and there is no point of view, aka there is nothing. If you just have a bunch of intelligent but unaware organisms on a planet consuming, meat or vegetables and using solar radiation to keep the system going,
Yeah.
there is no point to it.
Yeah, no, I mean, you're right. It's a fucking bleak perspective too. I find it a disheartening thought. I
Yeah.
like being conscious. I like looking around. I like being swacked on the beauty of nature and the vivid colors of a sunset. I think all of that is great. I
Qualia.
think to some extent a vast number of other species are capable of the same kind of aesthetic appreciation, the same kind of subjective awareness.
Over a long enough timeline, you mean?
No, I mean, I think even now, cats hold grudges. Rats have a sense of fair play. Corvids use tools and can come up with, gray parrots have. I mean, the Cambridge Declaration back in 2007 was basically a bunch of neuroscientists saying that there was a large range of species from, they included parrots, they included octopus, having near human levels of consciousness.
I have an African gray.
Yeah?
Yeah, I do have an African gray, but you know what is, because my wife is really into birds and animals, so we have an African gray. But what is equally intelligent, I think, and equally intelligent feels like crows, because she's kind of like, we have some wild crows that she's kind of gotten to be familiar with her. But what seems more intelligent is a raven. Ravens are like insanely smart.
Well, they found just the past few years, like within the past 5-6 years, and I'm amazed that they didn't know this before. It turns out that birds, corvids at least, which would include your ravens and your crows and your magpies, I think. Yeah, their neural density of their brains is 3 times higher than it is for mammals.
Mm-hmm.
So they got these tiny brains, but they're really packing the
packed.
transistors on board, right?
Yeah.
And that explains. I mean, these guys, they know, they can figure out math, they can figure out language, they
Logic.
can. Yeah, they have some amazing. I've seen videos of crows figuring out Archimedes' principle to get a peanut. These guys aren't, and I think we, because we are so human-centric, I think we vastly underestimate the cognitive capabilities of other species.
Well, why is it that it doesn't really matter? Just to kind of go back to what you were saying there before, why are you a downer? Why are you a naysayer? Or why do people feel sorry for you when you do say there's not really a point and we don't know what's going on, and if we didn't exist, nothing would exist? What is it about humans that really need to have something more? Why is that so important to? And it's the majority. It's almost everybody. Why is it that we? Because I get this all the time.
I mean, it's a case of it renders everything meaningless otherwise. So we have to attribute meaning to it. Otherwise, your whole life is meaningless.
But I guess the question is, why should that bother? Why should that bother us? It's an interesting question. Like, where is the evolutionary pressure to force us to impart meaning on things? Why can't we imagine a species that was perfectly happy being intelligent and aware, and also recognizing that there's no
but you could make the argument that all animals that are non-self-aware are like that. Like, if I think of my dog is pretty fucking happy. Right, like he's just stoked. He doesn't want this simulation to end. But I mean, I actually do come out of it on some kind of a religious end of the spectrum, I think, where I do think that everything is in the eye of the person observing reality, and like, the sort of the double slit experiment kind of wave. What is it?
Wave versus particle, wave particle duality.
No, yeah, but what's the wave function collapse called? Or it is wave function collapse, I guess. It's like the observer crushing all of those potential outcomes in some sort of a quantum superstate of all outcomes compressed into one acted outcome. To me, makes me think sentience and free will modifies this environment as we go through it. So I think, in my point of view, is that this whole paradigm around me exists for me to observe it, and when I die, it dies, which is, a totally religious, I guess, point of view, in the sense that I think that it's here and it's built on some higher level, and we're meant to exist and appreciate it. So there's a dualistic, some sort of soul is injected into the matter in a way that I personally believe. And my brother is a total, he would be saying something similar to what Peter is saying, which is that when he dies or when I die, all of this is still here, and it could all still be here without any sentient thing observing it, and the machine would just continue to chug on. And that is a colder, darker reality than the one that I think that I live in. Although I'm not.
What are you saying? Are you saying you regard yourself as a kind of Boltzmann brain?
I'm saying that there's an element. You can look at reality in two different ways. You can either look at it from the sort of the mononist kind of singular point of view of, or I guess a materialist would be a better way to put it. Pure materialism. So materialism is just you run electrical currents through a brain and you get this emergent sentience, and when the sentience dies, all of this rock and gravity and everything else is still here, and it'll be here until the universe goes through heat death. I think that all of the laws of physics and everything that are here make sense, and they do seem like they would continue on after I die, but they're only here to provide structure and a way that I can understand the world. And when I die and my observation ceases to exist, everything dies with me.
So we are all simply phantasms of your imagination, is what you're saying.
I think in some way.
You're the only thing that exists.
Yeah.
I don't know. That might be a really helpful attitude for a movie director to have.
I mean, it is. Yeah, it is solipsism, and it is a solipsistic point of view. But it's also, I think, kind of closer to religion too, because if you come at it from a sort of Catholic or most religious points of view, it would be that there is purpose, and that you are important in the machine. I don't know whether. It's hard to know what you actually believe when you get that deep with things. Like, do I actually believe that everybody just disappears and the lights turn off? I mean, maybe. I also don't believe time is linear either.
Let's put this to the test then, okay? You love your African gray. You love your wife. You love your dog. Yes. I don't know if you have any children, but if you do, presumably you love them.
I have one daughter, yeah.
Okay, so let's posit a scenario in which you die.
Okay.
And after you die, I tell you, I'm going to mow them all down in a hail of machine gun fire. But I'm not going to do that until you're dead.
I mean, you see, what would happen?
You should not care about that. You should not beg me.
But there's a possibility
that because they won't exist after you're dead.
There's a possibility that I'm wrong. So then I would have to kill you before I go. I would have to take you out.
It's always a loophole.
Now this is game theory.
Just finish your project first. So that we can read and watch it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Then you guys can go ahead and kill each other.
Yeah, then go for it. Yeah.
And families.
And film it. We must film it all.
Yeah, no, I would have to act on that. Like, my hands would be tied. I couldn't see them getting killed, so I would have to act first.
Just in case.
Mm-hmm. Just in case, exactly.
They discovered about a year ago a neutral switch in the brain that kicks in when you are confronted with reminders of your own mortality. We're capable of internalizing on a gut level that other people die. But when you're shown these little subliminal suggestions that, put you in conjunction with words like death, your brain goes into kind of cognitive neutral emotionally. And literally
it makes sense.
The clutch goes off.
No, it makes total sense.
That has a certain, I think that has a relevance to how we have to be able, we're smart enough to be able to perceive mortality, and we know that that's a bad thing just because our instincts tell us we want to keep living.
Yeah. Isn't there's another theory which I believe is very true, because I mean, maybe this is a paradox where neither of these should be able to coexist, but maybe they do coexist, because I think what you said is true. But I also think there's this other theory that says that pretty much every decision that you make, and this kind of low-level anxiety that humans just live inside of all day, every single day of their lives, is motivated by this constant ticking clock of a subconscious knowledge that you're going to die. Have you ever heard of this theory?
No, but
I can't remember
the feeling is very familiar.
I can't remember what it's called.
Nihilism? Is that nihilism?
No.
Woody Allenism?
No, it's an actual like you could fit it into like the DSM-5 and you know, speaking about dark triads or Machiavellianism or psychopathy, you could psychologically quantify it in a way that humans process each decision that they make and everything that they do and the way that they move through the world with this kind of background reminder all the time that they're going to die, and there's this ticking clock. And so it's almost the reverse of the brain going into neutral, but I kind of almost feel like those two things can exist simultaneously. But when I read it, I was like, that makes a lot of sense. And people's just base anxiety and sort of neuroses are fueled by this.
I don't know. You may be right. It's hard for me to see how those two things could coexist. And I still feel.
I'll look it up. I'll email it to you.
I recognize intellectually that I'm going to die. I don't think in my gut, I really feel like I will. I mean, it's easy for me to stand here and say, "Oh yes, of course I'm a mortal mammal. I'm going to die." But
you don't actually believe
in my gut. I think I'm going to live forever on a gut level.
Your brain just like flicks that switch and just doesn't let it be real. But
what's that line? That line from the internet. Everybody thinks they're going to be Mad Max. Nobody thinks they're going to be one of the skulls piled up in the background.
Yeah, that's true.
But the idea that you would just wink out and it's done, there's
a
lot of history of struggling with that.
Every time we go to sleep, we wink out.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, like my trips down pessimistic philosophy lane have some hilarious, quotes that are in there. Like, I don't remember who said this, but it was a famous author, but it was that it goes, sleep is good, death is better, but the best is never having been born at all.
I want to know who said that.
It's quite well known. I mean, and like Tolstoy would walk around like he had to remove everything on his farm that he could kill himself with, right?
Really?
Yeah. Bukowski always talks about these hilarious quotes where, all of a sudden he'll just throw in suicide in the middle of the discussion. Like, so, but I'm trying to think of the ones that have, because it's the idea of sleep that you brought up is exactly the same thing. The consciousness kind of just gives way to something else. And, death is probably along the same lines. How did we end up in this part of the discussion?
Tristan asked us.
Where
did I really?
Start? I don't remember.
I blame you guys. I think you guys brought us here.
That's what we do by staying out of the way in the interview.
Yeah.
You guys know the whole antinatalist movement, right?
I'm extremely familiar with antinatalism.
Talk about it anyway.
Never heard.
No.
I mean, basically, it's a philosophical position that says the one universal good, the one thing that we take as an axiom, is that suffering is bad, and that you want to minimize suffering, and that killing people who already exist is not a good option because killing somebody also causes them suffering. To me, I think there'd have to be some kind of algebra, like, if you kill them quickly versus you kill them slowly, and how much suffering you're avoiding, how early or late you kill them in their lifespan. I don't know, but I'm just relating what I understand of the philosophy. And that the best way to minimize suffering in the world is to simply stop reproducing, let us all die off quietly, go quietly extinct. And it's not a position based on humans are assholes that deserve extinction. It's not the universe would be better off.
But it doesn't even really have anything to do with humans in a way. It's just sentience inside the meat prison.
It's suffering is bad. Yeah. And if suffering is bad, that if something is never born, if something does not exist, it cannot suffer. If something is alive, by definition, it's going to suffer unless you're just constantly pumping it full of
which is also part. It's also part of the definition is that there's sort of a net negative overall of existence rather than a net positive.
Yeah.
So therefore existence is suffering, and therefore no new sentient organisms should be brought into the cycle. So antinatalism is advocating for no more human beings being born, and also it extends to animals as well. David Benatar from South Africa is from the University of Cape Town, is like one of the main antinatalist philosophers out there. But I spent like 3 or 4 years in this this kind of stuff, and I feel like I'm coming out of it now. So I really liked Suicide Squad from James Gunn. And I feel like I want some fun shit, like
Yeah,
I think that would
I
be
like
good
that
for me.
too.
Well,
very cool.
we've held you guys here for 2 hours, and I mean the great thing about these sort of conversations is that you kind of get to go wherever you want. We're not a press junket, and we're not, though we do want to see what's happening next in your creative path. These are the conversations we kind of live for on our podcast, because it's the deep geeks who find us. But
hopefully a couple of years from now, some version of the vampire that Peter came up with will have been viewed by some members of this audience, which would be pretty cool. So hopefully we end up making this.
Yeah.
That'd
Maybe we
be
could like film on location in Guelph.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, it's possible.
Peter's already coming to have beers at our place, so you should come too.
I was actually passing through Guelph. We were coming back from moving one of my stepdaughters to the University of Waterloo yesterday. And I really wanted to give Caitlin sort of the tour of all the places I'd lived, but she hadn't peed since leaving Waterloo. And so we really had to boot it home. But I was in town. I passed within spitting distance of you guys. But I have to get up there.
I would like to come out there as well. I mean, I've shot actually a lot of commercials in Toronto, and I know Guelph is outside of Toronto, but like every time I'm there, I just really I'm like a really big fan of that city. It's weird.
When are you coming out next?
I fucking love it. I don't know. I'm going. September and October are quite Eurocentric. I think I may actually be in Ukraine, which could be cool. But I definitely want to get out to Toronto soonish, and we should meet in person as well, Peter. That would be cool.
Yeah, definitely. Then you'll find out that I'm actually an octopod using a human filter.
Just communicating with that would be cool.
Right on.
Well, thanks, guys.
Well, thanks for joining us today. We really appreciate it.
That was fun.
Thank you.
And I will hold you guys to that beer.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're doing that.
Yeah, it's actually a thing, Peter.
Is the keg? Well, I guess they call it the brass taps at the university. Is it still a thing?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, it's there, but I mean, we're like all 30 years too old to be there. But
yeah.
But we can go anyways.
Nah, never mind.
Well, there's a lot.
Go to the Albion or something.
Yeah, we'll go to the Albion.
You know what we've been doing lately is going down to the brewery downtown, and there's a really shitty bar a couple doors down with some pinball machines. So we've been going there and rocking some pinball and drinking beers, and that's super fun.
It sounds like the kind of thing that would make my mortality denial circuit kick into full gear.
Yeah. Oh, it does. And it makes you feel like a kid again, because you're playing a stupid little game with lights that flash and you're bouncing a ball around. So
that's really all the human brain wants. It's just that.
I think, yeah.
Balls and flashing lights.
Well, that was a lot of fun. Thank you so much, Neill and Peter. We all really enjoyed that. Listeners, you had to have enjoyed it. You stuck around to the end. That was a good one. All right. Thank you so much for joining. We can't say that enough. We really appreciate you all. Until next time.